Did you know that Jesus may not have looked like the picture you've always assumed he did? Let's be honest. Historical accounts and artwork haven't always been accurate. We have depended on romanticized iconography, imperial tastes, and artistic interpretations for millennia. However, we are now getting a glimpse of what some of the most famous people in history might have looked like thanks to science and computer reconstructions. Curious? See how the well-known faces of history actually looked by continuing to watch. Jesus of Nazareth has been portrayed for millennia as a tall, fair-skinned man with gentle blue eyes and flowing brown hair. It's hard to see him in any other way because this image has become so embedded in Western culture. Around the world, this version can be seen in Sunday school textbooks, stained glass, and church murals. However, this representation is much more European than Middle Eastern. Furthermore, it has less to do with real history and more to do with art from the Middle Ages and Renaissance. In order to reproduce Jesus' appearance, contemporary forensic specialists have adopted a scientific methodology. They made use of first-century skulls discovered in the Judean region, as well as historical information regarding the typical features and physique of Semitic men in that time period. They created an accurate image of Jesus' potential appearance using facial reconstruction software and computed tomography. The prevalent image of Jesus contrasts sharply with this one. His eyes are brown, his hair is thick and curly, and his skin is dark brown. He has a large nose and features typical of a Jewish guy in first-century Galilee with Semitic origin. He doesn't resemble a person carved into a Gothic church. Rather, he resembles someone you might encounter in a busy marketplace in ancient Israel. In addition to changing the way we perceive the world, this shift helps us comprehend the historical and cultural setting in which Jesus lived and preached. Caesar Julius. For many years, Julius Caesar was regarded as a superb general and astute politician who contributed to the Roman Republic's demise. His marble busts, which are austere, strong-jawed, and slightly balding, are recognizable to most of us. Despite being educational, the purpose of these sculptures was to highlight idealism and power rather than realism. However, subsequent attempts by 3D artists and archaeologists have sought to provide us with a more realistic representation. Experts created a realistic depiction of Caesar's visage using information from marble busts, coinage, and even contemporaneous writing descriptions. Caesar's features in the reconstruction are far more recognizable. His considerably extended head may be the result of a congenital skull abnormality. His skin exhibits aging symptoms like wrinkles and sagging, and his eyes are narrow. He doesn't appear to be a Roman deity. He appears to be a real man who has fought in political conflicts both on and off the battlefield all of his life. 3. Perhaps the most well-known sculpture in Western art is Michelangelo's David. David, who represents the Renaissance ideal of physical beauty, is depicted as a strong nude young man in this early 1500s marble carving. His body is well-proportioned, his posture assured, and his expression serene. Too perfect, maybe. Naturally, David was not a Greek demigod, but rather a biblical character. Based on historical background and creative hints, digital artist Bas Uterwake employed artificial intelligence and digital modeling to recreate what a real person named David may have looked like. The end effect is a youthful face with warm olive-toned skin, wavy hair, and expressive eyes. He has more human, less divine, and more grounded traits. His face conveys the bravery and innocence of a young shepherd who faced a giant, yet there is a glimmer of vulnerability in his eyes. David's narrative is made even more inspirational by this reconstruction, which takes him off the pedestal and returns him to being a real teenager. Santa Claus is frequently the first person that comes to mind when we think of Saint Nicholas. A fat, cheerful man in a red suit with rosy cheeks and a white beard. However, the actual St. Nicholas was a Greek bishop who lived in what is now Turkey in the 4th century. A somber-looking man with pale skin, sharp features, and religious clothing is seen in historical artwork. Scientists reconstructed St. Nicholas' visage in great detail in the early 2000s using skeletal fragments thought to be his. They built muscle, skin, and other soft tissues using computer models and a head scan. the outcome differs significantly from Santa Claus. Olive complexion, a powerful jaw, and a nose that looks like it may have been damaged during his lifetime are characteristics of this rendition of St. Nicholas. His demeanor is stern, and his eyes are serious and deep-set. He seemed to have endured adversity and taken his beliefs seriously. Sang Kim. Napoleon Bonaparte. Typically, Napoleon Bonaparte is depicted as a short, stern, and ambitious guy who wears a military uniform and is nearly always seen with a hand tucked inside his coat. Although that stance was intended to convey calmness and discipline, it also became a distinguishing visual element in his photographs. Napoleon's visage was used to create a death mask shortly after his passing in 1821. This mask and historical information have been used by scientists and artists to digitally recreate his face. What we observe is really unexpected. Napoleon has softer features and smoother skin, making him look younger than he actually is. Despite having a large nose, he does not have a threatening appearance. He seems like a leader you could trust. However, he would not necessarily claim to be the Emperor of France. The recreation reminds us that even historical giants had normal faces and highlights the human aspect of a guy who is frequently portrayed as larger than life. The image of Washington is readily identifiable. A serious look, powdered hair, and that particular style of the 18th century. This picture, which is based on paintings by Gilbert Stuart, has gained notoriety, particularly because it is included on the U.S. $1 bill. However, those were romanticized representations intended to convey authority and dignity. So, to produce a more realistic picture of Washington, scientists and historians combine 3D modeling, descriptions, and a life mask taken during his lifetime. The face appears stronger and more rough in the upgraded version. He has visible wrinkles around his mouth and eyes, which are evidence of aging and hard work. His nose is wider and his jaw is more prominent. This Washington appears to have served on the front lines, endured the hardships of leadership, and rode horses through bitterly cold winters. Respect for what he went through is increased when one sees him in this light. Mary, Queen of Scotland, is number 7. A sad beauty is how Mary, Queen of Scots, is frequently portrayed. Tall, elegant, and graceful in dresses with exquisite embroidery. And her royal status and elegant features are highlighted in her portraits, which were made both during and after her lifetime. However, a lot of these pictures were romanticized and influenced by the aesthetics and politics of the day. These portraits were used by facial reconstruction specialist Caroline Wilkinson, as well as skeletal remains and literary descriptions to reconstruct Mary's true appearance. Mary's face is rounder and her features are softer in this rendition. Her lips are bigger and her nose is more noticeable than usual. Her trials, political incarceration, personal grief, and execution are all reflected in the weightiness of her gaze. Even while she is still gorgeous, she appears to be a real person who experienced actual hardship rather than merely a painted representation of doomed royalty. 8. Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, who penned the Declaration of Independence, is frequently regarded as the intelligent, astute politician. His portraits display a highbrow, well-groomed hair, and a composed, intelligent look. However, painted portraits don't tell the whole narrative. Thankfully, Jefferson's face was turned into a life mask in 1825. This gave researchers a unique chance to replicate his real facial shape. The outcome is really instructive. Jefferson appears to be thinking deeply because of his high cheekbones, solid jawline, and slightly pursed mouth. His intense gaze is accompanied by facial creases that allude to stress and extended workdays. He seems to be a man who is always thinking, figuring, and writing. Our comprehension of Jefferson is deepened by this restoration, not only as a writer and thinker, but also as a multifaceted human being. 9. Elizabeth I, Queen. During her reign, Queen Elizabeth I worked hard to cultivate her image. She maintained a rigid public image as the Virgin Queen, donned ornate gowns, and applied a lot of cosmetics. Her pale complexion, high collars, and emotionless eyes give her an almost otherworldly appearance in her photos. Instead of showing fragility, these pictures were meant to convey strength and purity. Historians and forensic scientists, however, were interested in her true appearance. They produced a more realistic picture by using age patterns from recognized portraits and descriptions from her contemporaries. This version is much more realistic. Her lips is set in a hard-worn line, her eyes are somewhat sunken, and her face is lined with age. When the makeup is removed, a lady who carried the weight of a kingdom is exposed. She still has a royal appearance, but she is not invulnerable. Benjamin Franklin Gishanti. Benjamin Franklin is regarded as a founding father, inventor, writer, and jovial thinker. He is typically shown in paintings as a pleasant, bald, elderly man with round glasses and a knowing smile. But over the course of his lengthy and adventurous life, Franklin's visage underwent major changes. To create a more complete image of his appearance, scientists and artists employed life masks, sculptures, and descriptions. A man with depth and humor in his eyes may be seen in the contemporary photo. He has bigger cheeks, and there are deep lines of thinking and time visible on his brow. He appears friendly yet obviously intelligent. You may picture him composing clever letters by candlelight, arguing in salons, or experimenting with inventions. Franklin is depicted in this recreation as the lively, inquisitive person he really was. 11. Richard III. For a long time, Richard III was portrayed as a cruel tyrant, with an intense stare and a severe face. He is frequently depicted in historical portraits with pale complexion, narrowed eyes, and a firmly closed mouth, a look that shouts, "Don't mess with me." These pictures solidified his reputation as a strict leader, but science had other ideas. His remains were miraculously found beneath a Leicester parking lot, and researchers used his skull to recreate his face. Unexpectedly, the actual Richard III doesn't appear to be a power-hungry ruler, but rather a bashful teenager. His gentle eyes and childlike cheekbones don't precisely fit the vicious image that history has assigned him. This version of Richard challenges our preconceived notions, and strangely enough, he looks a lot like Lord Farquaad from Shrek. Is it a coincidence? Perhaps? Legacy? Most likely not what he intended. Tutankhamun, the 12th king. The golden mask worn by King Tut is famous. For many years, it has served as the face of ancient Egypt, symbolizing grace, strength, and the enigma of a pharaoh's tomb. However, a completely different young man showed up when researchers began to take his face reconstruction using CT scans seriously. Tutankhamun was far from the golden-haired boy king. He had several health problems. He needed walking sticks to get around because he had a club foot and a cleft palate. His visage? In contrast to the idealized picture we were up with, he had an overbite, a narrow chin, and wide hips. Lean hips. His name continues to shine in the history books despite his physical problems. For someone who only held power for roughly 10 years, not bad. Cleopatra Trisonosta Cleopatra has long been regarded as the pinnacle of antique beauty. We picture her with radiant skin, dramatic eyeliner, and finely arched eyebrows. She is consistently portrayed as Caesar and Antony's beautiful seductress in films and television series. In actuality, Cleopatra was smarter than beautiful. Her features indicated her Greek heritage at birth. In contrast to pop culture, coins from her era depict a strong nose, a prominent jaw, and a significantly less idealized visage. However, her beauty wasn't what gave her power. She spoke at least 9 languages and was intelligent and strategic. That's the true reason she attracted attention. Nero, the 14th Roman emperor. In classical busts, Nero is portrayed as a strong, masculine character. He has a bold face, his regal stance. You wouldn't want to challenge him based on his appearance. However, contemporary reconstructions present a somewhat different picture. Nero genuinely had freckles and brilliant red hair, according to historical accounts and forensic reconstructions. Indeed, the man who was charged with destroying Rome wore a crown that resembled fire. His already fiery reputation takes an unforeseen turn due to the truth. Perhaps we underestimated the symbolic significance of meddling while Rome burnt. Bach, Johann Sebastian. Bach is depicted in the one and only artwork as a stocky, severe man with powdered hair. It is the face we identify with disciplined talent and classical music. However, Bach's burial remained unmarked for years, and we didn't have a better picture until researchers looked at a possible skull. He had softer face features than we had anticipated, a thick neck, and prominent cheekbones, according to the reconstruction. He still has the appearance of someone who could master a fugue, but he now comes across as more personable, like that passionate music instructor who could also make a delicious apple strudel. Nefertiti is challenged. Nefertiti's famous breast, symmetrical face, long neck, and royal headpiece epitomize ageless beauty. However, the 2018 reconstruction created a lot of controversy. The computer model, which was based on a mummy thought to be hers, showed a woman with elegant features but a different skin tone and facial structure than most people would have thought. The facial proportions appear to be in line with historical art, notwithstanding disagreements on accuracy. Her remarkable features are still there, though. Her reputation as one of Egypt's most seductive royals is demonstrated by the structure of her bones alone. 17. Shakespeare, William. The famed bard's image is derived from a few paintings, all of which depict him with wise eyes, a smooth face, and a receding hairline. Our perception of the man who gave us Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet was influenced by these portraits. But in order to create a more accurate reconstruction, scientists employed his purported death mask. Shakespeare's nose was bigger, his brow was heavier, and his skin was aged. The appearance of someone who experienced the harshness of Elizabethan England and spent time outside. The recreated image seems more authentic, not just a classroom icon, but someone who truly lived and wrote at that era. 18. Henry VII. In artworks, Henry VII is typically depicted as a solemn man with angular face and weary eyes. The visage of the man who established the Tudor monarchy and put an end to the Wars of the Roses. In addition to adding depth to his face, the scientific reconstruction based on his skull demonstrates that those traits were very accurate. A more realistic expression, larger cheeks, and a stronger jaw. This portrayal feels more like a real person rather than merely a historical figure. He seemed to have been able to maintain his composure while bearing the burden of a kingdom. Alexander the Great, 19th. Among the most ruthless conquerors in history is Alexander the Great. This Macedonian ruler, who was born in 356 BC, established one of the greatest empires in history, spanning from Greece to portions of India. Numerous sculptures and romanticized paintings of him have been displayed to us. Sharp cheekbones, golden curls, and a fierce look that conveys the message, "I've never lost a battle." Let's face it, though, those pieces of art were more about tradition than realism. We must reconstruct his appearance from written accounts and artistic interpretations long after his passing because there are no portraits from his lifetime. He may have had one brown eye and one blue, according to some. Some say he had golden hair, and he had pale skin. It's just conjecture. We can now see a more accurate representation of Alexander's visage because of AI reconstruction and some contemporary research. He still appears focused and intense, but he has a much more human appearance. His cheekbones are a little larger and his nose a little wider, and his flaws add to his authenticity. This is the Alexander who visited the United Nations and fought on dusty battlefield. 20. King Louis XV. When you think of King Louis XV, you most likely image elaborate clothing, powdered wigs, and a monarch who essentially resided in Versailles. It's not too far away. Louis, who ruled France from 1715 to 1774, was renowned for his elegant appearance and taste in dress. He was around 5 feet 10 inches tall. It caused him to be taller than the majority of his peers. His clean-shaven face, sharp nose, and slim physique made him appear dignified and sophisticated. He is depicted in our paintings as a self-assured king who is elegant, composed, and constantly dressed as though he owned the place. Since he did, however, flattery is not the purpose of science. Experts created a more realistic portrayal of Louis XV visage using digital reconstructions based on his skull and historical artwork. The final outcome? Although his aristocratic traits are still present, they are not as well defined as some may anticipate. He appears to be a guy bearing the burden of leading an uneasy nation, still sophisticated, simply put, more authentic. 21. The focal point of the Romantic era's music was Frédéric Chopin. He was a superb pianist and composer from Poland who wrote songs that are being played in concert halls today. Even though we do have pictures of him, they are outdated, faded, and don't really capture him. Hadi Karimi, a 3D artist, collaborated with the Friedrich Chopin Institute to accurately depict Chopin's visage. They recreated Chopin's visage with amazing accuracy using a thorough 3D scan of his death mask, which was first taken soon after he went away. Although Karimi had to smooth out some parts of the forehead and chin, the finished product looks eerily realistic. The weight of a man who dedicated his life to music is evident in Chopin's long, graceful face and the deep grief in his eyes. His sharp hooked nose, which was regarded as a sign of intelligence in those days, gives his features character and presence, even though the old pictures hardly mentioned it. One of the most divisive personalities of the French Revolution is Maximilien Robespierre. He was a revolutionary firebrand, lawyer, and politician who was instrumental in changing France and putting many to death by guillotine. It's likely that you've seen images of him wearing a powdered wig and appearing like a strict idealist. However, those pictures weren't taken from actual sitting. Thankfully, we have his death mask, which is more tangible. Madame de Sade herself is said to have made a cast out of Robespierre's severed head following his execution in 1794. Yes, that is morbid, but it has historical significance. By assembling Robespierre's face using this mask, scientists were able to determine his likely appearance throughout his lifetime. His eyes are more alert, his lips broader, and his face leaner than expected. He appears more like a passionate guy motivated by lofty goals and perilous beliefs than a mythological character. 23. Even though you might not be able to see Robert Burns, you have heard what he has to say. He is the poet from Scotland who wrote Auld Lang Syne. Every year, millions of people sing this hymn. Burns, who was born in 1759, penned poems that evoked feelings of passionate longing and national pride. Furthermore, although there are monuments and paintings of him, they have never really conveyed the whole picture. We now have a more accurate picture thanks to researchers at the University of Dundee. To rebuild Burns' face, scientists used forensic expertise, art, and sculpture with what is known about his remains. The outcome is quite expressive. Burns has a mouth that seems poised to recite verse, high cheekbones, and a contemplative gaze. His face seems friendly, yet craggy enough to convey that he has experienced both happiness and adversity. It's appropriate to finally meet the man whose words continue to inspire us today. 24. Dante Alighieri, the world's most vivid and enduring representations of heaven, hell, purgatory, and the afterlife were provided by the renowned author of the Divine Comedy, Dante Alighieri. Generations' conceptions of Satan, brimstone, and even the idea of sinners going through circles of agony were influenced by his remarks. It is therefore not surprising that he was depicted by artists as a somber figure with sharp features and a noticeable hooked nose. Formerly regarded as an indication of wisdom, here's the catch though. The cartilage that makes up the nose degrades quickly after death. Therefore, out of respect for history, the facial reconstruction featured a similar shape even if the renowned hook nose cannot be verified. The remainder of Dante's face, however, is much softer than those dramatic images would suggest. One major surprise? His forehead was not nearly as hard. The imposing literary giant is no more. The individual depicted in this contemporary replica has a more modest face and appears to be an inquisitive thinker rather than a menacing prophet. He might still be able to tell a fantastic narrative, of course, but if posters had existed in those days, people might have passed him by without even looking. 25th St. Anthony. Major catfish energy. St. Anthony became a saint sooner than most, only a year following his passing. Because of legends about his life and miracles, he is often referred to as the patron saint of misplaced items. The majority of photographs portray him as a young, kind man with soft cheeks, wide-set eyes, and that distinctive button nose. His features are delicate, almost ethereal. Suppose, however, that the facial reconstruction reveals a different picture. First of all, his traditional bowl cut is far less tidy in real life. After all, there were no clippers back. What about those gentle, nearly feminine features? Not exactly. Contrary to what his pictures would suggest, St. Anthony had a stronger jawline, a thicker neck, and an all-around more robust physique. Some features, however, remained intact. The button nose, the Cupid's bow lips, and the wide-set moon-shaped eyes. Everything is true. One significant change: the color of his skin. Although his pictures weren't entirely inaccurate, the actual St. Anthony was considerably more rugged than people realized, since he probably had much darker skin than the pale image you frequently see in religious art. More of a man of the people from the Middle Ages than a porcelain saint.